Sorry.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rainbow Sheep Chronicles, where I, Jung, a transformational coach and a holistic writing coach, and my very dear friend Marissa Raymond, who is a family-centered coach who uses human design, yoga, toe reading, and other energy healing tools to help you find your authentic voice, are coming together to share our stories about our journeys as rainbow sheep and also the tools that we have used to help ourselves tap into our authentic selves, finding our purpose as we have traversed life as 6'3" and 3'6" human design profiles. We are the role models, the experimenters, and the storytellers who are here to guide. How about you, Marissa? Feel free to share anything you want them to know.
Oh, I think you said it all, Jean. I think this is our first episode, and so we wanted to talk about what the name means. Like, what does it mean to be a rainbow sheep? Because it's language that we use a lot, and so I can share my story of how I came up with the concept of rainbow sheep for myself, which was um, that I really felt like a black sheep for most of my life. And you and I have talked about this, um, and there's a book that I read to my kids when they were little about an elephant named Elmer. And Elmer is a patchwork elephant, so he's multicolored. And in the very first book where of the series where you meet Elmer, he's the joking one. He's always pulling pranks and he's making the other elephants laugh. And he's just kind of walking his own walk, right? But at some point in the story, he starts to feel different. He notices that all the other elephants are gray. And so he feels really sad that he doesn't fit in. And he goes into the forest and rolls around in a bunch of berries to get rid of his colors. And he comes back to the troop. And when he gets back, all of the elephants are really sad and down and depressed. And he's like, "What's going on?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't know. Like, we just miss Elmer." And he rolls around in water and he's like, "I'm here." And he discovers that, right, the joy, I mean, it really is a story for little kids about the importance of being yourself, right? Of being your multicolored, impassioned self. And so, uh, as I've started to rework my identity and to find myself again, in this middle life, that image always sat with me. Like, I'm not the black sheep, I'm the rainbow sheep. I'm the sheep who gets to fit in everywhere and be my own authentic self. Um, and so, yeah, so that's where the rainbow sheep image came to me. And then you and I talked, and one of the first conversations we had was about feeling like a black sheep in your life as well. And when I shared the rainbow sheep, you really resonated with it too. So I would love to hear what felt like the black sheep to you. Like, what was that experience like? Tell us a little bit about um, what it was like growing up and when you first started to feel like the black sheep, and then when you connected with your rainbow sheep or that desire to be multicolored.
Thank you. When I started self-validating and I stopped trying to fit myself into a template that really just never was meant to feel satisfying and fit. Yes. So,
Yeah.
um, before I do that, I do also want to say that Marissa and I are both midlife women who are coaches, and we share the tools that have helped us with our clients to help them connect with their authentic selves and their purposes. And we met in this online global women's community that's really about supporting women to manifest their dreams and increase their prosperity. And it's very cooperative. And it really helped us connect around the fact that we are shifting paradigms and we're moving into this paradigm where we're all most blessed and prosperous and grounded and happy when we are vibrating from who we really are and we've broken free from this conditioning of having to follow some sort of hierarchy and patterning. So for me, I am the second daughter of three in a Korean American immigrant family. My parents were both very educated, the top, schools in Korea. My mother went to the top law school and she graduated at the top of her class, the only woman in a sea of men. So she was quite extraordinary. And she also had a very um, challenging start, being the only child of a widow. Her father died when she was three, and that's always a difficult situation. But in Korea, it's especially important for people to see that you come from regular family. So she really overcame that social stigma with her academic achievement, which is also incredibly important in Korea and perhaps all of Asia and all over the world. So she really, really outdid herself. And yet at the same time, she had a lot of PTSD, CPTSD after growing up with a very rigid, controlling mother who was trying to protect her from having a bad reputation because she didn't come from a normal family. And she never really fulfilled her idea of what she would do, which was to become maybe a judge or, just a very influential figure and have a pronounced career. She came to the States with my father a year after my older sister was born, and they settled in Ohio, which was not really the best place for her to achieve further education or find opportunities. And she did what a lot of Korean women do, which is channel their unfulfilled ambitions into their children. And that created just kind of, we were like a pack of wolves. My younger sister and I were just cutthroat competitive. We all did ballet and piano and tennis and swimming, and we were always kind of at each other's throats trying to outdo each other. And there wasn't a lot of room for just unconditional appreciation of who we were, how we were different. It was more just like get ahead, get ahead, get ahead. And we did. We performed. We all got into Ivy League schools. My sisters both went to one school. I went to Yale. It had a little bit more prestige, and it kind of made me, I think, resented by, yeah, that my sisters kind of resented me. Um, Especially my older sister, who kind of was, the number one son kind of figure in the family. And yeah, I got a lot of praise. I was sort of the hero child for a while. But prior to that, I had really been more of the lost child and even the scapegoat. And then once again, after I graduated from college, I had some abandonment trauma growing up because my grandmother had cared for me, my mother's mother, for 2 years. And then she left. And she also arrived the day that I was born. I mean, it's pretty uncanny. And I believe I was in the hospital with jaundice for, I don't know how long, maybe a day or two. And my mother's birth was also the birth that, my birth was very painful for my mother. So um, it was kind of, yeah, a lot, I think, that I picked up on as a very sensitive child. And then when my grandmother left, my younger sister was born, and my mother really just wasn't able to, who knows, bond with me and help me through that experience. And I see pictures of myself and I'm just like, where am I? And I still confront those issues. Sometimes, like being an entrepreneur and putting myself out there is just, feels really, really terrifying, And that's why working with you, Marissa, is so stabilizing, especially because you're a Capricorn to my Cancer, a 3-6 to my 6-3. You've got the Libra North Node to my Aries North Node. We have so many areas of complementarity. We also both have, you grew up in New York. I lived in New York for a year, actually a year and a summer. We both have, French as part of our cultural education. I lived there. We both lived there for a summer when we were 16 and with a French family. And now you've been there 16 years. I also lived in Korea for 7 years. So I also had significant time living abroad. And we also both have lived in Seattle, where I currently am, which is pretty amazing, like all of these
Like,
coincidences.
so we were meant to meet, right? Like the universe was like, we're gonna find a way to bring these two together.
And you're
Um,
American to my Korean American, which we've got a lot of parallels in our cultures, in our experiences as being kind of the um, high achieving sort of model minorities in America. Yeah. So I will say that after I graduated, I went to Yale and I graduated with honors, and I had um, a lot of the bells and whistles. It looked like I was doing great. I was part of the dance company in college, and I had a great group of friends, and I had lots of, you know, just fun. It was a great time. And yet at the same time, it was always kind of like suppressing a lot of my insecurities and fears. And a lot of the people that I was hanging out with weren't necessarily people who I think I could really feel completely aligned with. I think I had learned how to just people please and get along and get accepted. And so when I graduated, I lived in New York. I got a job in publishing really easily and an apartment. Everything just kind of flows when you're well connected. Um, and I was in a relationship with this Jewish classmate who I met after we graduated. And it really opened up all of my core issues. And it was really challenging and scary. And, we were young and he had his issues, I had mine. But it was just this wake up call that, like, I actually don't know how to be healthy and authentic in an intimate relationship because I have been trained to be something else, in order to succeed, which worked,
yeah.
I just was looking at such a lot of grief and fear and trauma. And after a year in New York, I was like, I'm out of here. I actually kind of was fired from my job as a sales representative for a publishing company because I just was like, why does anybody want to do this? And I wasn't always tracking what was going on. And she was like, I'll put in a good word for you in editorial. But I was like, you know what? I don't actually feel like publishing is where I need to be. So I came out to Seattle where I had a friend from college who had always been a role model to me. And I started doing all this work unpacking the conditioning. I just intuitively felt like that's what I needed to do. And one thing that really came to me was putting myself on stage alone, because dance growing up was one place where I did feel authentically seen. It was a rigorous discipline. I really felt connected to myself. And yeah, expressing myself through dance was just always a point of truth. So when I came to Seattle, that was really my primary goal, was to put myself on stage alone. In New York, I just felt like I would have to be like just doing what everybody does. It's such a grid in New York. And I had friends from college who were, taking class with Merce Cunningham and do, doing a certain kind of thing that just looked a little bit too competitive for me. Plus,
Mm.
like my parents hearing about it, I was just like, they would kill me if they knew I was trying to be a professional dancer in New York. But somehow being in Seattle, it felt like it was more open turf. And I also was exploring teaching and dance. I did do that. I did do solo dance performance, and it really was deeply healing. I had a perfect laboratory for it in this feedback group with other solo performers. I also did something called reevaluation counseling, kind of like primal scream therapy. It also looks at oppression and how it gets laid into people from very, very early in your life. And it helped me understand why I was in so much pain. Besides that, I was organizing an Asian American Artists Alliance because I had just been in New York where there was so much incredible, dialogue with Asian American artists and activists. Um, and I remember going to this panel discussion about the Miss Saigon controversy. They had,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
put
remember.
in white actors and for Asian roles. So anyway, I was doing a lot, writing articles about cultural appropriation, dance reviews, that kind of thing. And then after 4 years, I went to Korea. And I knew I needed to go. I had to make some money and pay off debt I'd gotten into. I knew I could teach English and make a lot of money. And there was an opportunity, and it all just kind of flowed. So I went over to Korea with this 3-week program to learn about progressive political areas. And then once I was there, my mother kind of finally kicked in a little support with a family friend connection. And I started studying Korean at her alma mater. And I started, working at the Korea Herald as a copy editor. I started, getting into the arts community, met an amazing avant-garde dancer, Shin Hong, who'd had a career in New York City and was back in Korea. And she had created this sort of outdoor festival that I participated at 6 years in a row. It was really amazing. I met like Eiko and Koma and Kazuo Ono and was supporting these artists and interacting and performing. It was really quite an amazing experience. And learning about being in a Korean was actually the main thing that I was doing there. I learned so much from my students. I actually taught Head Start preschool in Seattle, and then I taught first grade through university in Korea, and I taught professionals and homemakers, and kind of felt like I got through this sort of developmental exercise of learning about who I might have become if I had lived in Korea growing up. So that was very interesting. And just being there and meeting relatives and understanding the culture and how it worked, it helped me understand why my mother was so unable to let me just have my own life. I kind of understood how much pressure and oppression there is and how little freedom there is in Korean culture. So all of this kind of helped me understand why doing well, going to college, great college and having a lot of outer success, um, which was supposedly, doing well according to my family, that also kind of was my downfall because my sisters and my mother especially were very threatened by friends that I'd made in college and my desire to dance and to go to Korea and basically go way beyond the tribal vision of what you should be doing, which is
Right.
like,
To be the rainbow sheep.
yes, yes, creating that, you know, ladder hierarchy, just going
Yeah.
up that career ladder and establishing security and whatever, prestige, I guess. And I just was in so much pain at a certain point in my life. And I felt like I had proved myself, that I just felt outraged that I wasn't trusted to
Yeah.
continue to follow my instincts and do what I felt called to do. So I think that was the big wake up call, where I say I felt like I'd been ripped off. I'd been just fed a whole spiel that really was untrue. And I spent a lot of time just not understanding what was going on. But I will say
Yeah.
that once I was in Korea, I met this Canadian woman who actually read my astrology chart. And she told me what was going on. And I was so amazed and relieved that there was some kind of meaning to what I was going through. I was also going through my Saturn return. I went to Korea at age 27. Where did that come from?
You stayed for 7 years. There's a seven in there somewhere.
7 years. There probably is something to that. And then 27. And then I am just monologuing. I'll try to come to a close, but as an experimenter now, I realize like I was just totally doing what experimenters do, just throwing myself out there in all these different ways, like from solo dance performance to going to Korea to teaching all these different people in all these ways, traveling around Asia, traveling around Europe, like really questing and learning and making mistakes. The relationship right out of college, I just dove into that. And other relationships that I had also, just lots of very, you know, questing energy. And then after 7 years in Korea, I came back to the States, did a little tour of Europe on my way back, and found myself living with my parents for 3 months, which was very interesting, seeing them now through a lot more understanding.
Right.
And coming up the West Coast, thought I was going to try to apply to grad school and dance, and then decided not to do that. Came back to Seattle. My younger sister happened to be out here. She let me live with her for a year, and I've been back for 22 years since. And in that time, it's been still a lot of questing and also culture shock, reverse culture shock, which was challenging. Like I felt like Rip Van Winkle. I was lost kind of going out there and then coming back. I kind of had a plan to do the same kind of cultural bridge work through the arts that I'd done in these amazing international arts festivals in Korea. And then, like, people in the US, they don't even know that there's anything going on of significance outside of the US. So trying to create that authentically felt impossible. I was
Yeah.
just continually feeling so angry and frustrated, which is the not self in human design. And finally, in the co-counseling community, actually, that I had been a part of, really couldn't deal with my anger. I had a lot of anger. Coming back to the States after living in Korea for 7 years, you really understand what power is to some degree that I didn't before. And I was just like outraged and raged.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I found 12 steps. I started doing 12-step programs just to have like a place to share my truth. I was just starved for community. Seattle's a really challenging place to create community for people from the outside. If you didn't know that, it's true. And and that was one place where I could get some community. And I did have money issues. I had continually had issues around earning enough, debting, codependence as well. And it was a place again to just have community. So I finally started to get it together, frankly, through learning these different techniques and tools and modalities like astrology, EFT, law of attraction. Also, I had studied Qigong with a woman who I knew in co-counseling, who really helped me start seeing things in a totally different way. And I started understanding yin and yang, the West and the East. And that's a huge part of what I feel supports me as a coach to help others is understanding this energetic shift that's happening in the world. We've been on this trajectory of yang basically running over yin, including for each of us individually, suppressing and programming. And now we're pivoting where we're honoring our authentic selves with our masculine energy instead of running it over. So all of these modalities help me start to understand and unpack and decondition. And then when the pandemic hit, I'm like, hey, I know what's going on and I can help. And my coaching business started to coalesce. And I knew that I could help people. And I was. I was helping a lot of younger women of color who'd been through similar issues with their mothers, culture, finding their voice. And I brought in tapping, North Node astrology, which is an amazing game changer. I am not a professional astrologer, but I have been a student. And this one particular North Node book that I use, Jan Spiller's Astrology for the Soul, has really been helpful. And as a 6/3, just the wisdom and the compassion, the understanding that, gets downloaded when I talk to somebody. Just sometimes I need a few little holistic tools to help me kind of further refine what the options are. And it really works. So that's kind of my story of how I went from being a black sheep, figuring out that I was supposed to do something different, that it was okay that I was not fitting in, and that there was meaning in my journey. I will say one more thing that I tutored these two transnational Chinese adoptee girls who were 14, twins on the spectrum. One of them had been bullied in elementary school, and she was now bullying her sister, and the sister had had it. And as someone who understood what it's like to be a highly sensitive person, as well as an Asian American in a white culture, and also having poor attachment issues, and knowing from living in Korea and meeting many, many transnational Korean adoptees, volunteering at an orphanage, like what that is like. I really felt able to hold space for these girls, and it really helped them. And I finally felt relevant after like probably 7 years back in the US. I was like, oh my gosh, something that I have to offer is really, really helpful. So that was, I think, a huge turn of events too. So that's my long monologue. How about you, Marissa? Tell us about
That.
your rainbow sheep
Well,
journey.
I mean, so first of all, I mean, I just feel like I learned so much more about you, things I didn't know. So I really appreciate you sharing all of the details of your journey. And one of the things that really resonates with me when through the lens of human design, which I think whether we're talking about human design or just talking about the human experience, um, when we're in it, we don't necessarily take time to learn the wisdom of the moment, right? And as a like the six lines that we have, um the the gift of that sixth line is experimenting, doing a whole lot of trial and error so that you can learn wisdom, so that you can learn the lessons. And I think part of the struggle for everyone, but especially in that that experience of the six line is, and you spoke to this when you talked about your Saturn return, right? Like we have these three phases. So we have this early phase where the sort of the first 27 to 30 years of your life where you're just in experimentation mode and you're here to make mistakes and you're here to test things out and you're here to get dirty and get in the mud and take chances. Um, and that also happens to be the time when the education system is like, you need to fit into this box or find this pathway and walk this line and plan your 40-year career where, right? And so it discourages us from being our true self. And some of my earliest memories of feeling like the black sheep was like if you asked me, I mean, I remember being like 6, 7 years old and being asked, what do you want to be when you grew up? And I was like, I want to be a teacher during the day, a lawyer on the weekends, and a dancer at night. Like I wanted to be these three different things that had nothing to do with one another, right? Like it was just, and that was before I even really understood what those things were. I just knew that I loved dancing and expressing myself creatively through movement. I was not great at it, but I loved being able to just move my body and my energy. It felt good. I knew that I loved to be around other people and like learn things and then share what I had learned. And I knew I liked to argue, and I used to be like people were always like, "Oh, you like to argue? You'd be a good lawyer." But what I also remember at that time was being told like, oh, haha, that's so cute. You want to do all these things, but you're going to have to choose one. Like you can't do all those things. That's not realistic, right? And so I don't believe in it. And in retrospect, like I don't think anyone was trying to like hold me back or poo-poo my dreams. I think it was like you said with your mom, like their own conditioning that like they weren't conscious of, that they were putting out there. My parents were certainly people who said that I could do whatever I set my mind to, but then it was like, but you can't set your mind to three different things. Like you have to pick one, right? Like so like those mixed messages that we get. Um, and so I think it was very clear for me from the beginning that I was an experimenter, that I was wanted to do a lot of different things. I run three different businesses right now. So, I mean, it's not something that has changed in me, but in a similar experience to what you're sharing, following that path of like, I also went to like, I was labeled gifted and talented as a 3-year old. I went to magnet programs. I was constantly told like, oh, you're going to be the cream of the crop and the elite, like doctor, lawyer, right? Like there was these sort of paths that I was told like, this is more prestigious. And because you are smarter, like this is the path you should take. And anything else is like beneath you. Um, and so when my first rebellion was rebelling against the Ivies and going to a small liberal arts college. The irony being that I chose Bowdoin, which prides itself on being a little Ivy. So I didn't completely, right? Like I didn't step so far off the path. Like I didn't allow myself to truly rebel or to truly experience what it would have felt like at 18 to disappoint people. I still stayed within the lines, just maybe a little bit outside. Um, and I do remember like my dad being like, nobody's heard of Bowdoin, like kind of what you were talking about networks, right? Like, no, like you're not going to get a job afterwards because nobody's heard about this. Like you're making the network smaller. And then my dad told someone that I was going to Bowdoin that was in his professional network, who was like, oh, that's a great school. And he was like, oh, did you know Bowdoin was a great school? Right? And then like all of a sudden I got this approval. But yeah, it's like what you're saying, right? It's this like this journey of like, at least for me, was like, well, like I feel like I have to push up against this wall, but I didn't feel safe breaking it because I didn't know if I was going to be caught or if I was going to belong, right? Like it felt like, well, if I truly show who I am, I'm going to be rejected by this structure that I fit really well into, right? Like I was successful in these things. So it was this that external validation. Um and I followed that path. So I like graduated from college and went to work as a management consultant in New Jersey. And after about a year was like, this doesn't feel right. And my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, was living in Seattle. So he was like, come to Seattle. And I was like, okay. And I went to Seattle and spent 6 months really struggling. I mean, your point about if you don't have a network or a community while you're there, it can be really hard to break in. And I think that's true of everywhere you go. Um, for me, you know, I was like, oh, well, I'm like, I already know my boyfriend and he's at the university and he has like his graduate school friends. So I'm gonna have this natural community that's gonna be welcoming and accept me. But I didn't have a job. I didn't know what I was gonna do, right? We had bills to pay. Uh, and I think I told you this story. Like I went to Safeco Field to I must have been there for like a month or two. And I went to Safeco Field to a job fair, and I was walking around going like, maybe I'll be a manager at Foot Locker. Maybe I'll be a financial analyst. Like there were so many choices because Safeco Field is a baseball stadium, right? Like there's all these levels. There must have been, I don't know, like 2 or 3 thousand different companies that were there. And I'm just like, ooh, that, ooh, that. Like again, like that 3-line experimenter, like I want to do all these things. And I did. Like I went for an interview at Foot Locker. I went for an interview at a financial analyst company. I went for an interview at the company I had worked for in the management consultant company. Uh, all these different things. And I ended up getting a job in a lab. My background was in biology. I had worked in college on cancer research. And so again, it was like, oh, I could do all these things. Oh, but here's the safe thing, right? Here's the thing that I know I'm good at. And then I went to grad school after doing that for a year and a half, 2 years. Um, and while I was in the School of Public Health, getting my master's in public health genetics, I met a genetic counselor. My master's degree thesis was on genetic services in Washington State. And I was like, oh no, like this is what I want to do. And so I went to grad school again to get a second master's in genetic counseling. And I loved it. And I felt like this is my niche. Like this is the thing. It combines, it is the like teacher by day, scientist by night, like, because you really are there as I mean, it's the counseling, right? You're there to hold space and to help patients navigate the medical system as they're trying to determine whether they have a genetic disease or if they have been diagnosed with a genetic disease. Um, you know what that process is going to look like. and what the risks and are to have a child with that condition. So you're also talking to them and educating them about genetics and inheritance. And so it checked all these boxes. It was like every single day was a different opportunity with different people to learn a different disease and have different conversations. And then we moved to France. And similar to, um, what you were saying too about like you just moved to this other place, and that immigrant experience, which I'd heard my entire life growing up as the daughter of an immigrant in a city of immigrants. You can't do the thing that you trained to do. Your diplomas are useless here. And so for me, I think part of the realization of coming here, and it was also when I just learned about human design for the first time, because it was like, oh, yeah, you're 3-6, like you're 30, like 30 to 50, you're in that second phase. So you're done. You're still kind of experimenting, but now you're like in that cocoon phase of like your parts of you are trying to figure out what's the wisdom, what have I learned? And so the next 15 to 20 years is going to be really uncomfortable because you're going to have to start like peeling back these layers and digging in and learning wisdoms, which means like confronting the things that didn't feel right to understand why they didn't feel right. So that you can, like you were talking about the frustration, right? The things that brought you frustration, the not self, so that you can focus on that's the guardrail, and you can move into the places of the things that light you up and bring you satisfaction and joy. And it's been a really hard journey. Like I'm still in that cocoon phase. I'm coming towards the end of it. I'm 48 now, and so I'm coming to that closer to that second Saturn return where I'll move into the butterfly phase more and have that sort of wisdom more embodied. But in doing it, I really started to see all of the experiences that I had, and having to rewrite the story of them being mistakes or failures, and write the story of them being another color on my wool, right? That makes me who I am, and that makes me unique, and that allows me to help my clients in ways that nobody else can, because nobody else, like, right? I mean, in human design, we say like you're a one-time only cosmic event. Like nobody ever has been or ever will be you. And so it was totally in alignment with my genetic counseling understanding, right? But it was also this, ability to say, I want other people to feel this way. I want other people to know that they are worthy just because they are human. And these conditionings that they put on themselves, or that teachers have put on, or their parents have put on, or society's put on, or whoever it is, we all go through that, and we all then spend time ripping it those layers off to uncover the beauty of who we are. So I'm still in that. I think we're always on that journey. I think part of the beauty of the rainbow sheep is that there's always another color to uncover. Um, and but that's also the challenge, right? There's a gift and curse of all of it. So it is an existence where like you are constantly going, oh, there's another layer I can peel back. Oh, there's another like story from my past that I'm holding on to that I need to reframe or release. But it's beautiful when you have friends, and I think that's and partnerships and community, and I think that's part of also the beauty of being rainbow sheep is like sheep live in a tribe, right? They live in a flock. And so you finding that flock and finding the people who see you, who reflect your gifts back to you, who will hold you accountable when the shadows come up and help you to realign. Um, it makes the journey a little a little bit more fun, a little bit more joyful, and certainly it allows you to see like how far you've come, because there are definitely days where I'm like, I still feel like that 22-year-old Marissa leaving college going like, God, like I'm so sorry. Like you had all these plans and I didn't live up to them. Um, and then I'm like, no, actually, right? Like I call you and you're like, come on. Like really? No, you know you've done these things. So it's important to have those people in your life for sure. And I'm so grateful that I met you, that we're doing this podcast together, that we get to share these stories and this experience. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. I also learned some things about you that I didn't know. And I also want to notice that we're in our, I'm in my 50s, you're 48, and we still have these voices in our head. I can even hear it in the way you're sharing about your father saying, oh, Bowdoin is a good school. Like, we still have these feelings of like, have I done enough? But I
Yeah.
think we didn't become doctors and lawyers. You followed your genetic and science interest. I went into dance and lived in Korea and have been a tutor and then a coach. And that is outside of what our parents expected, our families expected, we were raised to do. So I just want to, acknowledge that we both have had a certain amount of time in the paradigm succeeding and then have been breaking apart. Um, and I also wanted to say something around let's see, what was
Can I just say something about that before while you're reflecting on what you want to say? I think one of the things that's come up for me is I so understand now as an immigrant now, and we can talk about this in another episode, um but I understand that root desire as a parent and as an immigrant of wanting my child to have a strong foundation for their future and their life. And so there is an element of me, just to reflect on like what you were saying about your mom when you went to Korea, like being able to understand that they did the best with what they had, and that even if it didn't feel good to be on the receiving end of it, it was coming from their own discomfort, their own conditioning, their own fears and worries, because they wanted us to have a better life. And there's a lot of, it helped me to release a lot of resentment, because it was sort of like, you pushed me, you pushed me, you pushed me, and now I'm miserable and a failure and all these things, right? And it was like, oh no, like that's just how you knew to try and make me be the best version of myself. And I'm becoming that version, because that was a guardrail for me. Like, I know I don't want to speak that way to my children, right? I don't want to feel that way about myself. So I think part of the lessons that we learn through our sixth line is like the lessons of being able to see what other people were going through as well, and to reflect on that experience for us. And so that helps us to cut those cords as well.
Right. Yeah. I actually just listened to this podcast episode by Dr. Ramani, who helps people around narcissism and healing from it. And she said some really great stuff about think of how you are as an empath and as an introvert, and how challenging it is for you to change. It's just as hard for people who are narcissistic or have their particular conditioning to change. That did help me also. I remember thinking about that in terms of like addictions. Like I have my compulsive behaviors, and as hard it is for me, that's as hard it is for my mother to break free of hers. So that actually has helped me too. So yeah, we're closing in on the hour, so I want to do the tapping so that we can
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is such a great thing to tap on.
definitely. But I also want to notice, like, I really hear your cross of penetration, your incarnation cross in the work that you do, kind of penetrating all different aspects, genetics, and yeah, health, public health, um, and toe readings. Like you really go
I'm
out.
definitely here to look into minutia, right? I'm married to an astronomer who like looks big picture, and I'm like, nope, give me the microscope. I'm gonna penetrate
Stones.
into like,
The toes are
give
perfect.
me the toes, give me the microscope, give me the children. Like I want to find the root of everything. So yeah.
And I kind of hear my left angle cross of demands, like I can be very demanding. And I'm kind of like, look, everybody, we're on yang over yin. Now we're switching. Come on, everybody, wake up. And it doesn't happen like that. It's a negotiation. We still have our hangups and we're trying to negotiate, but the more we're able to start allowing ourselves to just embrace who we're meant to be, you were able to, shift your father's perspective about Bowden. And my mother is now aware that Korea is an amazing, up and coming influence in the world. She had actually had a lot of pain about Korea. And when I went, she was really angry. So we help other people when we follow our intuition, our guidance, our design, instead of just capitulating to what we're told to do. So yeah, I'd love to get into the incarnation cross in another episode, but let's
Yeah.
tap in. Um, for me, it's about trusting ourselves and feeling worthy and loving ourselves as we release conditioning those ideas of what we're supposed to be.
Yeah, I love that. I agree. Embracing all the colors of the rainbow on every part of your body.
Yes, I love your inner child language that comes through, which is probably why you're such a great parenting coach. So everybody out there, we're going to do something called EFT, Emotional Freedom Techniques tapping. And it is like acupuncture without the needles. It will help you release any emotional, energetic blocks that you carry still in your nervous system, in your meridians, as you hold a thought field. It's good to be hydrated because it uses water, and it also is good to flush out the toxins. So please make sure you get hydrated. And then when you're ready, tune in to how you're feeling about this idea of the way you've been told what you're supposed to be and do. Could come from society, could come from your family, could come from a spouse. And feel in your body where you have some emotion or tension around that idea. So I'm feeling something in my solar plexus, feels like fear. I'd say it's about a 4 on a scale of 0 to 10. How about you, Marissa?
I feel it in my throat, and it actually feels like anger, frustration. And it's also around a 4, maybe even a 5.
Wonderful. Can you give me a line or two about the thoughts that come up when you think about this anger?
I think I'm angry that I didn't speak up sooner.
Mm.
Um, and there's still some anger that I am not able to express my anger even to this day to the people that I want to hear it, to the people that I feel like should hear it. Um, they're not necessarily ready to hear it, so it still feels like I have to release it in a different way.
Got it. All right. Um, just asking somebody to give me a few minutes. Okay, so let's start tapping. We start by tapping on the side of the hand. And I'll just say my fears in the solar plexus are about putting myself out there. So this is the setup point, and we say something 3 times to help our bodies get ready to release our bodies and minds. So even though I have this tension in my body, repeat after
Even
me,
though I have this tension in my body,
I feel it in my throat, my solar plexus.
I feel it in my throat.
So anybody out there can just think about where they feel it, give it a number. It's about a 4. And I deeply and completely love and accept myself.
And I deeply and completely love and accept myself.
So we say a phrase like that to help ourselves just own where we're at and get ready to release. So even though I was told I was supposed to be something
Even though I was told I was supposed to be something
from a very young age,
from a very young age,
and I got disapproval and pressure when I didn't.
and I got disapproval and pressure when I didn't.
But something inside of me wanted something else.
Something inside of me wanted something else.
And at a certain point, I broke away.
And at a certain point, I broke away.
And I love myself for that.
And I love myself for that.
So even though I am where I am in my life right now,
So even though I am where I am in my life right now,
and sometimes I say that's not enough,
and sometimes I say that's not enough,
now I am affirming that I'm exactly where I need to be.
I affirm now that I'm exactly where I need to be.
And I deeply and completely love and accept myself.
And I deeply and completely love and accept myself.
And we'll start tapping the inside of the eyebrow, one or both. This feeling in my body
This feeling in my body
of anger,
of anger,
fear,
fear,
unrest
unrest,
inside of the eye. Afraid I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do,
afraid I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do,
that I'll get punished,
that I'll get punished,
that people will think there's something wrong,
that people will think there's something wrong.
and under the eye. I've been conditioned to believe there's good and bad.
I've been conditioned to believe there's good and bad.
There are winners and losers,
There are winners and losers,
and that I might be straying from the fold
and that I might be straying from the fold.
under the nose. But I also trust myself
But I also trust myself
about what feels right and what doesn't.
about what feels right and what doesn't.
And I'm glad that I've taken action to move in another direction.
And I'm glad that I've taken action to move in another direction.
I'm going to dip in the chin. I'm grateful that I've trusted myself and carved my own path.
I'm grateful that I've trusted myself and carved my own path.
I'm grateful that I have learned to trust my own intuition.
I'm grateful that I've learned to trust my own intuition.
Collarbone points. I am a rainbow.
I am a rainbow.
I am a multitude.
I am a multitude.
There are infinite possibilities within me,
There are infinite possibilities within me,
and I get to explore and choose.
and I get to explore and choose.
Under the arm, about 4 inches, I choose to heal, release, and let go
I choose to feel, release, and let go
of any discomfort in my body.
of any discomfort in my body.
It's okay to let go of these shoulds.
It's okay to let go of these shoulds.
It's okay to pay attention to what I truly want.
It's okay to pay attention to what I truly want.
Top of the head. When I follow my intuition,
When I follow my intuition,
really tune into what I want,
really tune into what I want,
what makes me feel happy,
what makes me feel happy,
purposeful,
purposeful,
fulfilled,
fulfilled,
and of service,
and of service.
I feel great.
I feel great.
and other people come around.
and other people come around.
Take a deep breath. Thank you. How do you feel?
I feel great. My throat's cleared up. It's probably down to like a 1 or almost even a 0.
Perfect. Yeah,
Great.
I felt freer too in my solar plexus. It was so good to just have somebody to witness, to connect with, share all that with, and then release. So I hope everybody out there got something out of our hour together and about with the tapping. Please leave any comments in the comment section, any questions, any requests of things that we might talk about. And Marissa, who is in France, in Bordeaux, and me in Seattle. We're across the globe from each other, complimenting each other. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you next week.
Bye, my friend. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.